Leveling with spells and having a good time. Name a more iconic duo in Path of Exile. Part of the reason that spell leveling is so popular and so successful is a lot of your damage is based off the gem itself and its levels. Thus, your damage naturally scales as you progress through the acts and even into early mapping. Now, you're not as gear reliant as you would be with a melee weapon, but this doesn't mean weapons are completely irrelevant. A good weapon early on can definitely improve your experience. And so, today I'm going to be talking about the various crafting methods that you can use and the things you should look out for if you're trying to make a weapon like that. The focus of this video is not going to be endgame items. Instead, it's going to focus on a weapon that you'll use while leveling, and maybe into some early maps, though I will get into some more endgame stuff as the video goes on. To start with, what is the basic weapon that you should get as soon as possible? It really depends on if you're playing a hit-based spell or a damage over time-based spell. A damage over time-based spell is going to scale the best off of gem levels, whereas a hit-based spell is likely to scale really well off of flat damage early on. So, a simple way to do this is the vendor recipe. To make a flat spell damage weapon, you need a magic weapon. A rare wand will not do for the purposes of this craft. Then you'll also need an alteration orb and a ring. The ring can be any rarity, though we'll get into more of that in a bit. Sapphire will give you flat cultist spells, Ruby will give you flat fire, and Topaz will give you flat lightning. It does need to be one of the elemental base type rings. Now the ring's rarity is important because a normal ring will give you a lower tier roll. This lower tier roll will be much better if you're, say, level 5, and not so good if you're maybe level 30. If you're playing a spell build and you want to make a few of these, keep some alterations handy, look for a magic wand with your colors, and then grab some rings. Ideally, you'll want a normal, magic, and rare ring. The item level of the stuff involved doesn't really matter unless you plan to craft it further. As soon as you can, combine the ring with the first wand. This should ideally be something that you picked up off the ground early on due to it having good sockets and links. From there, as you're leveling, keep an eye out for another wand and also a magic ring, and a little later on keep an eye out for a rare ring. By the point where you're using a rare ring, you probably won't care nearly as much about the weapon itself and if it's linked or not. At that point, you'll be likely transitioning into a 4-link. This will give you a lot of flat damage that will be very effective for hit-based spells. If you're playing a non-hit spell, the best thing you can do is get a +1 wand. And to get one of these, just grab something that is item level 2. You can farm it in a low-level zone like the mud flats, or of course the coast. Very often, League mechanics are another good source of early weapons and shields that have +1 gems. The reason you want level 2 specifically is that's the lowest level where plus gems can roll, and it will greatly limit your pool. From there, you'll just alt spam it a bit, and you should hit a +1 fairly frequently. Though if you're farming this low-level stuff, there's a good chance a weapon that's usable will drop anyway. Then, if you happen to get lucky from an early syndicate, throw some dot multi on, otherwise, just call it good. Maybe craft a little spell damage if your damage over time skill does benefit from that. Now let's get into something a little bit more advanced. For part 2, what if you need the +1 and you're a bit higher level? Maybe you've even done some maps. Well, there is also a vendor recipe for +1 weapons. You can combine a white weapon that's on the base type that you want, a wand, rune dagger, or scepter, with quality gems whose total quality equals 40%. Make sure that all of the gems share a tag with the affix you're trying to roll. So for example, if you want +1 to level of all physical skill gems, you can use any skill gems with the physical tag whose quality totals 40 or greater. Once you vendor it, you'll get a wand with just the +1. From there, you can do things like Aug Regal, craft a mod, or multi-mod it if you're feeling spicy, maybe even recombinate if that stays in the game, but overall, you should be good to go and you should have a really solid starter weapon. Because this requires quality gems, you're probably not going to find it super early, which is why I say this is more of an early mapping strategy rather than something that you use during the acts. Next up, I'm going to be talking about some more endgame upgrades, things that you'll do once you're already in maps. Before I do though, if you're still here, it probably means that you like the video. If so, you should hit like. And if you want to see more content like this, maybe you found it helpful, maybe you're going to share it with a friend, then get subscribed, as I'm going to have a lot more stuff coming out in the near future. If you need help with leveling, or you tend to struggle, then the best place to go is my Discord, where you can ask questions and hopefully find an answer to what you're looking for. A special thanks to my patrons and YouTube channel members for the continued support, but more about that at the end. For now, let's get back to talking about crafting caster weapons. Regardless of if you're hit-based or damage over time, the next thing you can do is take the method that I mentioned earlier about rolling an item level 2 wand up to the next step, by rolling it with Essence of Woe. Again, this only applies if your damage over time build scales off of spell damage. You grab an item level 2 wand, and you use Essence of Woe until you hit the +1 gem that you want. It's not all that hard to hit +1 gems, but it will take a little bit to hit both +1 gems and the spell damage roll of the specific element. So instead of just grabbing one wand, I suggest grabbing 5 or 6, as a lot of the time you'll be able to sell the wands that rolled +1s that you didn't use for an amount that covers all of your costs to roll the item. If you want to get really spicy, you can even do something like Prefixes Can't Be Changed and Veiled Chaos in an attempt to get a good suffix. Be aware though, it's very likely to just hit junk. Then finally, as you're going from here into red maps, where should you look for further upgrade sources? Harvest and fossils are great ways to get extra attempts at a weapon. This is especially the case if you're playing something like Ignite or Corrupting Fever, which doesn't benefit from spell damage, therefore uses a weapon which is rather difficult to roll with any of the methods that I've mentioned so far. But for most things, your best bet by far is going to be Rog. After all, Rog will offer plenty of caster weapons, and because he can upgrade mod tiers, there's a very good chance that you'll get a tier 1 flat damage, +1 gem, or maybe even +1 all spell skills. If you're really desperate, you could try to alt spam, but I don't particularly recommend it. You're almost more likely to hit something that you don't want than something that you do if you're using alt spamming. So when you're looking to go from yellow to red maps, at that point you could just buy your weapon. Alternatively, if you want to try making it for yourself, definitely go for Rog. Maybe throw some fossils that you get at a weapon base in the meantime. Definitely throw harvests at a weapon as well, just to use all of your resources. Personally, I find that Reforge Caster More Likely is actually pretty good if I want a cast speed weapon. But most of the time when I'm playing a spell build and I need an upgrade, that upgrade doesn't come from Harvest. Inevitably, it comes from Rog. So when you're doing your early expedition, prioritize him and try to get as many resources as possible. Of course, if recombinators stay in Path of Exile, another option will just be to recombinate together 2 bases. Take something like fire damage and smash it together with +1 fire gems. But I have no idea if they're going to stay or if they're going to be as accessible as they are in 3.18. But if you're planning to level a spellcaster build, hopefully you found this helpful. And I'm curious, are there any other aspects of leveling which you find confusing and could maybe use more clarification? If so, put your questions down in the comments below, and remember there's lots of helpful people in my Discord who might be able to point you in the right direction. A special thanks to my patrons and YouTube channel members. Your support helps keep me independent and allows me to turn down things like sketchy mobile game sponsorships. You can do so for as low as $1 a month over on Patreon, or if you want to support me completely for free, then you can join the community by hopping into my Discord, link below. If you want more content, check out my second channel, 10 Gaming Thoughts. It's a place that I use to review games, ramble my way through video essays, and a lot more. Or of course, you can just click the suggested video in the card right now. I hope you learned something today, and maybe I'll see you again sometime soon.